Are you fed up with printing exercise programs? Or horror, drawing them? Solve every exercise prescription issue you can think of using Rehab My Patient. Thousands of pictures and videos of every movement you can dream up. Send by email or WhatsApp, translate into different languages at the click of a button. Don't take our word for it. Sign up for a 3-month free trial now. Just go to rehabmypatient.com/physio matters.
Nicola Graham, welcome back to Chewing It Over. Now, this is weird because obviously you're now my co-host, or you have been in recent months, and so this feels strange to be doing a bit of a debrief or catch-up or whatever. So how was the high performance series?
Well, I suppose firstly I have to say thank you, Jack, for letting me run with it for the episodes that we've done. Um, it like just purely on a personal, it was great from a learning experience and to be able to have those conversations and that opportunity to network and speak to people at about topics that they're interested in, but also at kind of a slightly more depth than you would in just general passing the time of
Yeah,
day with
yeah,
people, which I loved. Um, I think it evolved as the series went on. I don't think I've explored everything that I want to in some of the topics and the areas, but we were just, maybe we'll pick up on that, looking back on what the brief was or what the idea was at the beginning.
yeah.
And have I achieved all of that? I'm not sure yet, but you can tell me.
Sure. No, I think that that's interesting. I tell you what's really fascinating about what you've just said at the start is I really do, it still resonates with me what you're saying there because you can't manufacture these conversations, and sometimes the act of broadcasting them brings them together, and it gives you an excuse to enhance that conversation in such a way that you just can't do if you're not pressing the red button to record or that there isn't an intention to broadcast. And so you being able to scratch that itch and pursue your own curiosity there is definitely something that I've found over the years, and how especially chewing it over is kind of exactly that. And I suppose this speaks to this as well, is that we had no intention of necessarily jumping on this as one part of the plan, part of the series or anything. It was more that I was just like, now I really want to understand how that went from Nicola's point of view, and I know that we will have a different conversation, if not better conversation, if we were to then broadcast it as well. So that's kind of what I'm doing here as well, which is cool. So what do you feel are the, before we talk about what the intentions were, what were the key sort of take homes, do you feel? What were the common threads that you noticed from the guests that you experienced, and were they a surprise at all?
Um, I think there was, I think what is really clear is there's a huge amount of passion still in the industry.
Okay.
From the point of view of collaboration, optimism. Um, there is also some frustrations and some challenges, most definitely. Um, but people, practitioners, and I did speak to, even if they weren't currently clinicians, majority of people are clinicians by background still and have transitioned into different roles and things. They are still, oh, you stopped my video.
Oh, sorry, I've clicked the wrong button there. Can you turn it back on? Sorry, already giving Jim some work to do. Sorry, mate. There was a slight lag, so I was
I
trying to fiddle
cannot
around with
start
it.
your video because the post has stopped it.
I banned you. Hold on. What have I done here? This is stupid.
I washed my hair this morning.
It wasn't that. I wanted to see you. It was just because there was a lag. I thought I'll just try and sort it out, and then I've like banned you or something, haven't I? Ridiculous. Where are you? Sorry about that. Right.
What was
Nicola
it you were trying
Graham.
to block out?
There was just a slight lag in the video. That's the start video. As in, like your audio and your video wasn't syncing, so I was
Oh,
like
okay.
trying to. Anyway, you can try and remember where you were. Um, right. So there's some frustration in the industry. Let's go from there.
Yeah, there's some challenges that are related to kind of external aspects, potentially around funding, relationships with PMIs, challenges in the kind of the systems and the infrastructure and the data that we can access and we can't access. So different kind of aspects that we're probably all aware of, but are also common threads. I think what was also clear is there's some real common characteristics in people who are interested in the industry and how it evolves and innovation within the space. And I don't mean particularly that they're all creating new products or services, but everything, all industries, all markets are always evolving. We're not static, there's always changes occurring. And so characteristics around a growth mindset and curiosity and questioning things and not accepting mediocrity or that that's just okay, and can we do something different? It's great that it's working, but is there always something else that we could do? So some questions around that. And one conversation that particularly stuck out with me, which has only been out a couple of weeks, I loved the conversation with Pete Grimberg, because of the entrepreneurship and the, I suppose the aspect around entrepreneurship and business and taking physio into a completely different space. Whether you agree with it or not, whether there should be digital health and MSK triage, it was more the mindset around here's a problem, and there will actually probably, and we know there definitely will continue to be a supply and demand problem for healthcare services. How do we address that? And so it's that problem solving aspect, which we all again do as clinicians. That's what we're doing with patients, but using those skills and transferring them into a different way of delivering it. I particularly enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such an obvious example of innovation, isn't it? It's such a it was like a lateral move. Do you think there is something in Pete's story and other guests that you had that were physiotherapists by background or equivalent MSK professionals, that there is something to them as people where that was a really relevant part of their story, or are they just people that ended up being like, by temperament they were likely to go into innovate somewhere else, and that they were just passing through as a clinical work?
I think there's a couple of different things. I think we're natural problem solvers. I think we're really, really great problem solvers. And so we are not going to sit and we question things. And so we're not going to sit and do a job that won't allow for that ability. We're also very human people, as in conversations, communications. We are not going to sit on it's not going to be black and white screens. Like there's color, there's communication, there's humanity to it. And so I think there is different roles. I think most people I speak to probably come from a bit of a sporty background as well. So that aspect from
Right.
sport into MSK, just from the people that I've spoken to, or thinking about Fiona and the military and sport and ballet, like there are some kind of common-ish career path, but I've only spoken to kind of 7 people out of, actually I don't know how many MSK practitioners there are in the whole of the UK at this point. So it's a small sample of the network that I had access to, or that I knew I could have conversations with. So kind of biased to some degree based on my network,
Sure.
but there were some kind of common characteristics through them.
Did anything surprise you in particular?
That not everyone wants to talk about failure. Not everyone wants to talk about getting things wrong. I think there's still, I don't know if that's cultural or that's healthcare culture, but we know culturally, I think in the UK and Europe to some degree, failure isn't viewed well, compared to the US, who I think are slightly different in that respect. And within healthcare, obviously litigation and it's, I think the thing that I thought was really interesting, and it was a conversation I had with Dan Howes on the leadership aspect, is getting things wrong in healthcare and that being negligent and unsafe is one aspect. Getting things wrong because we're experimenting, we're trying different things, that should be embraced, and we probably don't embrace that enough. We think there is still, or potentially a cookie cutter, it has to be done this way. How do we treat a knee? How do we treat a back? As kind of general examples. Well, we don't know, because we don't know that person's life. We don't know what demands they have on their time. We don't know what job they do, what activities they do. There are those degrees of personalization that actually requires a degree of experimentation, and we should be comfortable getting that part wrong and learning from it. But I think we view failure maybe quite binary, quite black and white.
Yeah.
And
I
I
wonder
think
if
we should lean into failure a bit more.
I sort of wonder if those things are more coupled than they should be, because people feel like a business failure, whilst it wouldn't then indicate clinical neglect, because of that very human nature of what we all are, we would feel like the patients of which we've then served and then can't serve because of, say, business mistakes or whatever, then it almost feels like it's all wrapped up in one, that there's almost that the failure is more consequential somehow than it would if you were running a corner shop or a tech company. I think one of the
Yeah,
things I've realized as well, because the American part, we've got good evidence for that, haven't we? Like bankruptcy is a badge of honor for entrepreneurs in the
yeah.
US, whereas you very rarely hear of it here, or if you do, it'd be sort of shameful. And in healthcare, especially, it would be like, well, what went wrong, and what was the fallout of that? Almost feels like it would be quite taboo. So I do know what you mean by that.
Yeah, but if we don't fail, it means, I'm not going to say it binary, but it may mean we haven't tried either. So
Yeah, yeah,
then what happens? Because yeah, I agree. Like in the US, when I did one of my modules in San Francisco on entrepreneurial finance, the VCs were very clear. They they embraced failure. They wanted entrepreneurs who have
yeah,
failed because it
yeah.
shows tenacity, resilience. They've got great learning experiences from it. We know that reading a book compared to doing something, you learn more by doing and then actually teaching it. So we have to have action, and action then creates the learning experience. And some actions will go wrong, and that's okay. But we don't have
Yeah,
that conversation.
sure.
And we
No,
point
I get
fingers a
that.
lot. It's on social media. It becomes very personal. And it doesn't always need to be, I don't think.
Do you think that your series had was it a series of individuals, or did it have a thread there where there were? What am I asking? Is there more consistency or less consistent than you were expecting in terms of the guests, their stories, etc.? Like I was, because I have my own take on that. I'm happy to answer because I really enjoyed it, but it was just something that I think I had expectations that were slightly different.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea to look back on what did I actually send you as like the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thing.
No,
And
I've
just
enjoyed
reading
that.
out, I wanted to focus on entrepreneurship, leadership, mindset, business, wins and struggles, with an overarching link to high performance and what it means to different people in different contexts. Um, I'm not sure we got high performance out of it, but your definition of high performance may differ on each personal level as well. I think we got insights into different people's thoughts and different career trajectories that they've taken. Um, so, what am I saying? We've got some amazing people in our industry, but have I got to people that are doing amazing things yet?
A
I
cutting
don't know.
edge. Yeah. Well, let me flip the script on you with that then. What does high performance mean to you?
High performance to me is around characteristics, I've decided. So it is around um, a growth mindset, it is around curiosity. And curiosity is a massive thing for me now, I think. That's a word. A word that used to embed my career to date was empowerment. But actually, I think curiosity has taken a front seat for me. Um, because it shows an interest in change. And then alongside that, for high performance to occur, for me, it's now got to be action. I spent many years, many years, with either ideas or thoughts and getting really frustrated in my own head at what I'd achieved or not achieved. And the reason I now reflect back on it is because I wasn't actioning any of them. So if you don't start something, you don't know how it's going to be. So for high performance to develop, and occur, action has got to happen now, I've decided.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I, as I said, really enjoyed the series, and you know me enough to know that I wouldn't just be saying that on air, and you'd have heard it from me during if I wasn't honest with that. I really did enjoy it, but I did think that at times it was Nicola Graham life stories, and that was enjoyable because of the subject matter being so interesting to me. These people were interesting to me. It's an adjacent network to mine. Some of these characters I didn't know of and stuff probably should have done. But on that, the reason I feel like it was more that than maybe what we were setting out to do was because I think to some extent, I think high performance, and I apply this not just to the people you spoke to, but maybe across the board, and especially if you think about the high performance podcast, of which is, of course, huge. Um, I think it's maybe overdetermined, this high performance. I
Mm.
think that we end up in a situation where we might then, by baiting reflections from successful people who are on a journey, I think that sometimes there's almost a post hoc rationalization of why things have happened as they have, when actually it's just that you've got driven, passionate, determined people who are interesting, then they've pursued something, succeeded, or are in the process of succeeding, then offering reflections as if there is more to the building blocks of that, as if there is, if not a blueprint, but like a way in which things could be done. Whereas actually the uniqueness of each person's story and journey meant that then it's just like, is this not just the inevitable inertia of interesting, dynamic people? And if that is the case, then is there such a je ne sais quoi to high performance that actually it's going to always be an ill-defined term, because this is just successful entrepreneurship?
Or are you just in the right place at the right time with the right product service in the right room talking to the right people? But
Yeah.
I do like there's a saying, I know I want to get the words right, but I never get words right, like song lyrics, anything like that. I'm terrible. But the luck is when opportunity meets preparation, I think. But what I
I
mean
hope
by
you're
that,
right. It
I
sounds
can
good.
never
Let's
quote.
go with that. It's good. Good
But
quote.
what I mean by that is when someone says they got lucky or something, they didn't. They've spent years before that preparing. They didn't know what they were preparing for, maybe, but they were preparing, they were growing, they were developing, they were asking questions, they were challenging, they were networking, they were being in different rooms, trying different things. And then an opportunity came about that was able to be acted
Yeah.
on. And that's then called lucky, but it's not. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
that happens before that. So I agree. Could 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 you have, and you did to some degree, but could you have been successful in a different career path and market and industry? Well, of course you could have. Could I? Yeah, but probably all of us could. But we chose a path and we've stuck on that path, and you've developed time, you develop experience, and then actually it's probably not worth moving particularly because you've got a huge amount of experience in that area.
Yeah.
So I agree, like it becomes that, are we chasing something that isn't really, yeah, isn't really a term? But I also think if you actually look at the high performance podcast, that's evolved over time, and you've got probably life stories going on there now, haven't
Oh
you?
yeah. I don't. That's the thing. I don't. I definitely apply what I've just said across
Yeah.
the span of both our version of it together, Chewing It Over High Performance, and the High Performance podcast. Everything I've just said applies across both. And I think that partly they can't help themselves but think, oh, we could get this celebrity on. I think they're just doing what podcasts do and go like, well, let's make that work. Rather, and so which I understand. And then but the other thing is that then what we perhaps thought, I don't know if I'm lumping you in with this, but I certainly thought that in this instance there would be a consistent determination to high-end customer service and what that meant and examples of that, or
Mm.
the robust application of data. Like I don't know if people maybe slightly did this more, but a lot of people kept things close to their chest on the specifics, right?
Yeah.
Is that them just erring on the side of that because they feel like that's still their USP, or is it that they feel that if they were to speak too specifically, that would be of less interest? It was hard to know, but I think that people hung
Yeah.
back a little bit on the detail.
Yeah.
Or is it that that detail is so specific to their circumstance that it is more good luck than good judgment, and that we do find that difficult? And the good judgment comes from the preparation, it comes from the building of that character that was in the right place at the right time. And that's something that, you know, I know I reflect on, but it was so interesting to see that crop up. And then by episode 4, 5, it was like, okay, there's a sort of consistency to this that means that these are interesting people on, and it makes for an interesting conversation, but it doesn't necessarily then give a suite of high-end tips and tricks almost for
Yeah.
where people can either not make it similar mistakes because the mistakes didn't get really discussed, as you've mentioned, but also that the things that they then do that would stand them out from a crowd in terms of high performers didn't necessarily come together. Would you agree
No,
with that?
so how, like, reflecting just on that right now, what could have been done differently? Like, is it, firstly, should it have been called high performance? But don't know. But that's the focus that kind of it went on at that point. Do we need to, as an industry, speak to people who have been there, done it, and are out of it? Because they're happy to share things that are closer to their chest on what they did. However, how relevant does it become then? Because the world changes so quickly, everything
Yeah,
changes so
yeah.
quickly. But I agree. I do think people hold back, whether they believe it's their competitive advantage, their secret sauce, whatever it is. But I also completely believe now I'm probably more transparent than most people. And the reason is because I can't do what you can do, but you also can't do what I can do, is the way I now view it. So even if
Absolutely.
you gave two people the exact same task or objective to achieve, let's say in a clinic setting or something, they will do it very differently because it's based on their own skill set, their own knowledge, their own experience and things. So I do, I would love us all to be more transparent and collaborative. And I hope I try to achieve that through MSKPN or any conversations I have with people. And I suppose I probably can do it a little bit more now. I'm not a physio, so I'm not being questioned on my actual clinical skills. And I believe now through especially doing an MBA, we're all got the same problems around people, systems, processes, kind of thing. They're all the same. And so actually having multiple inputs or insights into how you could, and then it becomes a choice as a leader, but how you could um, tackle something is great. Because the reason there isn't a cookie cutter is because you've all got different resources, you've all got different times, you're all a different leader, you're all working in a different geographical area. Like, there's so many factors that you as then a leader have to decide what you do within your business. But having access to how everyone is doing everything, I don't think is, and probably I do think, like, I think Katie Bell's doing a great job on this in like her work that she's doing with clinics, if we bring it down to that level of like challenging things around pay as you go versus subscription, like different commercial aspects to it, because the clinical care I think will differ. I suppose,
Yeah.
would your preference be that there is a standardization in MSK? This is quite specific, but standardization in MSK that reflects high performance, that is commercial or clinical focused, or both?
What if I had to pick, or because
Yeah,
it
like
definitely would be,
what would
it
high
definitely would be,
performance in
it
an
definitely would
MSK
be both.
setting look like?
Well, if I believed that this was an actual credible market, then both would come hand in hand, wouldn't they? I don't think that one could be the other in the fullness of exposure. So we've talked before about the fact that I think that something that is being commercial at the expense of clinical quality is likely to is going to take a long time to get found out, because we haven't got a really well informed populace, right? So they could be bullshitted to for a long time, and be sold a clinical line that's not of high quality, but it could well be a really well-oiled machine that is high performance in its customer service, its output, its data management, etc. But then the other way around, I think that lets itself down because there's no efficiency for their delivery, so they're not going to see as many people, they're not going to help as many people, so it can be clinically brilliant, but that's just stuck in the head of usually one or two individuals, and so that won't work. So it's going to be a bit of both, but I think that it's just that the way that they can't. For me, I'm always saying that on a market level, I think that we sometimes hide from the fact that we've got a really ill-educated populace in that direction in terms of their understanding of pain and injury, that we've got a massive sort of turf wars still need to go on interprofessionally and intra-professionally that kind of work out what the clinical product is, you know, how much is science and how much is art, and those sorts of boring stuff that obviously we get stuck into the weeds on at Physio Matters. I think that the reason they still matter is because if we don't tidy that up, then it's really difficult to aspire to that dual prong attack of high performance, because I do agree that that's what we need, but I just fear that we sometimes, and this sort of speaks to what I think happened, is I think that whether they're meaning to or not, I think that there is a little bit of cowardice that creeps in as to why we're not as specific. Like, it would have been easier for your guests, and having obviously had hundreds, if not thousands now of podcast guests before, they were all brilliant, but they left 20% on the table for me because they weren't willing to then define what they weren't. Like, it would have been really straightforward, but it would have been braver. And they wouldn't have had to name names, but they could all have said, just to clarify what I am on about, is that here's an example of what I'm not. And it had been like an overt, like this, just only one way. And it's a kind of way of communicating. So I'm not criticizing them for it because it might not be their style, but I'm just meaning that if they'd have been brave enough in each instance to say, well, just one way of shoring up what I'm meaning is this is what it isn't, and I'm moving, and I'm like overtly against XYZ, right? And I need to, or I made, or that might have unearthed some of their mistakes, right? That might have been how they talked about it. Is at one point I did this, and I definitely know I don't want to do that or be that again, and this is what happened. So this is what I am. It's just that because it's like, and I think this is very healthcare thing, is that it's like, just talk about carrots and not sticks. Do you know what I mean? It's just more pleasant. Like, if we just talk about reward and not about punishment, as if it's just like it's all going to be fine and we can all sing Kumbaya. Is that, I'm not saying your guests were that, because there were far more to it than that, and they weren't happy clappy at all. Right? The show wouldn't have gone on as it did, as successfully as it did, if it had been that. But I think that one of the ways in which I sort of analyze it is that we're just not quite brave enough for whatever it is, to be specific enough to not call things out maybe, or to lean into some of that admission of failure. And that was sort of a general reflection that I felt like I took away.
And I think that's fair. And I think that's, I think there's a wider aspect to that, in that to be clear about what you are, or who you are, or what you stand for, is around values, isn't it? And that also requires quite strong leadership. It requires it requires some stability. And I'm not, if we relate it to the private market, it's really immature still. It's still kind of growing. We don't have national providers that we look up to that are leaders in this space. So we're still floundering a bit. We're still finding who we are. And if you go back, like reflect back at being about a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, we didn't know who we were then. So we're kind of like back in our teenage years of not knowing who we are. I do think that's a really important point, though, just on a strategy kind of aspect, for anyone starting clinics, got a clinic but not going the direction you want, or not happy with it, is knowing where you won't, like in strategy, a good reflection of it is like a football pitch. What are the rules of the game? Where will you play and where won't you play? Because that's as important as where. So I won't do, as a clinic, NHS contracts. We're not set up for it. I don't have the leadership skills for it. We don't have the staffing. I'm not interested in them. I think they're loss earners. That's how I feel about it. So it's been talked about occasionally over the years. I'm like, I'm just not going there. I'm not interested. So knowing your skill set, your resources, what you have available, and where you won't play, or where you can play, but also what that means is where you won't play, is as important. But that also comes down to, I suppose, it does come down to leadership, but it comes down to knowing who you are. And rather than just being clinicians, and I don't mean, I hate the word just, and I'm sorry, I should take that back. But rather than solely being with your clinical hat on,
Yeah.
you have to spend time on your business in the broadest sense. And that's not just what system are you using, but it's like, what are you going to stand for? Where are you going to be in that market?
I just see that as being the opportunity to, like, before I even got chance to ask you this, what you said about NHS contracts as your example, before I even interjected with another question, you then answered why, because you've interrogated yourself as to why. You had 10 answers to that question because you and others around you have been the person, like the kids do, where they'll pull on your shirt, go, why, why? You've scratched beneath the surface of yourself to know why. Might not be the perfect answer. People might not agree with it, but you know your own why underneath your own why, right? It's just that there's layers to it. And I know some of the guests that were on your show that they've done some of that work. I just don't think they were broadcasting it. And then there's others that maybe on the specifics of which we were talking about on the show wasn't necessarily there. I don't know, but I don't know them. So I'm definitely not calling them on that. But one of the things that I really wanted to get you on before I know we need to wrap up is, as a general rule, I don't think you disagree with this characterization, is that I'm a little more squeamish to corporatism and size. And I sort of have a general sense of, that's an area where I kind of get a bit bothered, particularly as it applies to our sector. Less bothered in supermarkets, more bothered in healthcare, right?
No, let's go that. Why are you? Say why you are.
Why? Because
Yeah.
because partly it reflects on what I said earlier. Is I just don't know how to get away with those. I don't know how we minimize the externalities. They talk about pollution in broader sort of macro
Yeah.
capitalism. For me, the externality is the fact that the market is they're so unknown that if we're trying to use control variables such as the actual patients knowing what quality is because they'll see it when they feel it and they'll get better, I feel like I don't know how to deal with that mitigation. So as you scale it up, the more middlemen you put in between, which is what happens with franchise models and other things like that, is that you've got to have enough margin to pay all those people. And eventually, I feel like that does end up compromising quality. I just don't know how it doesn't. And especially because I'm in touch with the workforce. Like, I think I changed my view if the magic wand then meant that we had the competency standards clinically that just raised up a level, I think I changed my tune. So that hopefully gives you some clues on the why, although that'd be another podcast. But and I will accept, and this almost part of my question for you is, I know that I'm possibly like there's something underneath my concern in that direction that isn't always perfectly justified, right? I don't know if I'm right on that, right? I think that's why I describe it as squeamish, because it's almost like not well justified. It's not hard and fast, and it's malleable. But I just sense that between us, I know we've got similar concerns, but I just know that you're a bit more sympathetic to it. Did any of the conversations that you'd had in this show, or since we spoke about maybe this very matter was at least 6 months ago, perhaps, has that evolved at all? Do you find yourself understanding my squeamishness, or do you think I'm actually just missing a trick? Like, just wonder what your general reflections are in that.
Like, come on, let's be honest here. It's because you've got personal experiences of people who have been careers and passions have been destroyed by corporate organizations that have not reflected the level of practice or the standard of practice that they thought they were moving into. I think that, so it's not a squeamish, it's not a it's a genuine, because you've got experience and what's the word I'm thinking of? It's happened. It's a lived experience, and therefore it's not squeamish at all. But
Well,
what
just to
you can't
clarify,
do
though,
is
Nick, just to clarify, because you made the distinction between healthcare and supermarket for me. You insisted on me making that, which is fair. But I know of people that had corner shops that I don't feel the same way about, even though I know that they experienced it being a really annoying when Londis ended up just taking them over, right? Or they moved a Tesco next door. I feel differently about that market than I do in healthcare. That's why I'm accepting that there is a squeamishness to it, because it's not well defined. So I know what you're meaning there, that
yeah.
my experience is colouring it, but it's not all the story.
Yeah, okay. And I think there's probably something more in that around, is it about independence or is it about group, like
Possibly.
how do people shop kind of thing. But the bit I was suppose I was going to get to, and let me get my train of thought back on
Sorry.
that. No, it's fine. Is yes, my opinion has changed, but it's changed for different reasons. I think we can't tarnish and generalize corporate or large structures or networks. We know what's happened, and we could say what's been good in them, what hasn't been good in them, what can we learn from, what would we do. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just means we haven't found what it looks like going forward yet that could work. I lean more into, and I think Physio First actually had a great plan on this years ago, but it never materialized. Cooperatives, groups, um, the equivalent of what would be LLPs in accountancy firms or consultancy firms or kind of thing. It's groups of experts, and that could be individuals or clinics, with their own kind of identity, their own culture to some degree, but coming under an umbrella that assists from an infrastructure point of view. As you and I both know, running clinics is hard work. Systems, processing, marketing, finance, HR, all that actually isn't the clinical care and could be standardized, because what we're talking about is a good clinical experience, a good booking system, being able to be able to book an appointment, be able to pay for an appointment, be able to contact a consultant, get the letter from the secretary. All that kind of stuff could be either standardized with technology or could be amalgamated for efficiencies within those variable costs within a business that have to happen. They are no competitive advantage. These are the ability to open your doors and deliver your service. So those, I believe, could and we should be encouraged to be grouping together, collaborating on, because it will make everyone's job easier and it will standardize that level of customer service that people expect. So electronic notes are an absolute basic for me. Online booking is a basic. Paying online is a basic. Like, there is no excuse for not being able to have those systems in place within your business. It's 2024. It's ridiculous if we don't, kind of thing. Like, and reach out to people, find out how to do it. It's like, it's not bad that you don't have it, but want to have it, because you have it in every other industry. You as a customer in every other sector have that. Why would you not want it in healthcare? It reflects badly on our profession not having it, kind of thing. So that's
Yeah.
where I think there is a opportunity for things to group together and to consolidate, but not at the expense of patient care and not profit over purpose of what you're actually delivering. So if your
Yeah.
motivator then becomes that you're driving revenue for a shareholder for a PE firm, that's completely different to delivering clinical care, and your purpose of your business is to deliver physiotherapy.
Yeah, I think as well, I've just not met or heard of any PE firm or individual venture
They're
capitalist that
out
would.
there. They're out
No,
there.
but
I've had conversations and
what I mean is though that in what world would they not be interested in both ways in which the margin
yeah.
can be squeezed?
Sorry, going
I don't
back, they're
understand the
not
con.
private equity firms. They're individual entrepreneurs who are looking to grow kind of a healthcare business. They may have experience in corporate finance. They may have worked at a PE firm themselves and they don't like the culture. They're trying to do
Sure.
something different. So
Mm.
there are, we can't generalize
Eventually,
people.
you get we haven't got a lot of there aren't a lot of costs associated to actual MSK clinical care, right? So that's one of the things that happens is that eventually there isn't enough fat to trim, and so you end up needing to suppress labor costs because you're just administering one-to-one or group care. Like I don't know where it comes from
No, so
because it's
my
just a
breakdown,
service.
if you've got 100%, if you think 100% is your price you pay for a service,
Yeah.
I'm going to say 50% goes off in your labour costs, and that
Hmm.
shouldn't really change. You may get it to 45%, 40 at a real push, but that's still going to be a proportion. 20 to 30% is your costs associated with running it, and you need a 20% net profit margin. And that's not because we're fat cats. It's because
No, no, that seems
you have to
reasonable.
replace a couch bed
Yeah.
every 10
Just
years.
don't,
You
just
have to
don't.
replace, like,
I need to understand, and this is what I know we're out of time, but I need to understand from you or elsewhere, and maybe you can signpost me to the people to talk about, be on air or off air about this, is that 20% I don't know how that goes 5 ways at scale for it to
Why does
then
it need
make
to
it
go
work.
5 ways?
Because that's the nature of the way in which some of the ways in which some of these models then scale, right? Is that you end up with networks of which then those those things, who's taking that out of it? Who's the manager that needs to be incentivized by that margin of that? And for this example, for 5 ways, I'm talking about, say, the classic sort of franchise model in which then part of that needs to come out. Then there's the regional manager of those that needs to be incentivized by that margin. So it's what I'm meaning is I think that the MSK industry's got a struggle on its hands anyway because it's such an obvious sort of commoditized service that I can see why so many are going into beauty therapy. So many are turning into sort of glorified health spas. You and I obviously like the more conditioning performance health coach type model where we want to scale into things that don't just rely on us managing people that are otherwise injured or in pain because that's such a small part of it. So we like that model and we think we've got good ethics to actually pursue that. But the other things I've just mentioned are the only ways in which they can sort of scale to actually keep that margin chunky enough in order for other people to get cut in. And I think that that's one of the things that concerns me. But I know that that's not for us to reconcile right now. But I was really pleased to hear that this conversation continues to evolve partly from your experiences on the High
Yeah.
Performance
I
podcast.
think there's two kind of points just to pull out. When I grew my business and grew, I grew geographically and small sites like like 1 room, 2 rooms. I don't think that works. And actually, Fiona Moore at Go Physio, her husband wrote a book on this years ago, and I read it actually, and I was like, no, I'm going to try this strategy. I don't think it actually. I think one site with like a minimum of 6 rooms, even kind of up to 8 rooms, is actually the better model, the better financial model. And you could argue is the better cultural model, is the better team model. It
Mm,
encourages CPD, learning. You haven't got that lone working issue. You've got accountability. People know what's happening, like with the other place. You haven't got one person off on the room, no one knows what they're up to, kind of thing. So I do think my thinking around the model has changed.
yep.
And the other aspect I think on that is, I think there is, the networks that have been done previously are based on, it's not based on what we like around value-based healthcare. It's all done on targets that are waiting lists or price per appointment, and maybe that has to evolve and change over time, um,
Mm,
because we know it's ticking a box, but it's not really helping long term, the
gotcha.
industry and the market and people's understanding and the value of what healthcare can deliver. We're having to undo a lot of, like, clinically we have to undo a lot of fear avoidance behavior and
Yeah,
conversations
yeah.
around that. We're also having to undo a lot of conversations around just come for one appointment, have a sheet of exercise and off you go, kind of thing. Like we're having to fight
Yeah, it's a
against some of
good
those
cultural
conversations.
culture, like clinical and operational culture shifts that are
Yeah,
required on
yeah,
the macro.
yeah.
Yeah,
But it's a
just
great
to,
convo, and I think it's evolving, and I suppose that's my biggest reflection is, have the conversations. Like, it's
yeah,
not it's not black or white. Everyone's evolving their thinking,
yeah,
including the finance people and the PE firms and things. They're having to
yeah.
reevaluate their whole models because it's not delivering what they thought it would deliver either.
No, that's right. And for those that haven't already, do follow Nicola on Substack. It's been fantastic, and she wrote a brilliant piece in the first MSK mag, which annoyingly it was a call to arms. She was talking about, I think this market's an enigma. Proved me wrong, and as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen anyone do that publicly because it's been fascinating that continues to be the case, and we need to stop ourselves being a basket case, really, in a cottage industry, as we talked about it. So thank you so much for all you're doing, and thanks so much for the high performance series. If those who haven't checked it out yet, please do go and have a look back. It's a fascinating group of podcasts, of which it was a pleasure to do. What's next for you?
There's one more episode that's due to come out on that series on the 18th of August. It's around well-being and well-care from a medicine perspective. So, come away from high performance to some degree on that last one, but that I think has naturally happened.
Yep.
Um, I'm leaning more into well-being. I'm really interested in the tech side, and I am pursuing and formalizing some of the work I've been doing with other organizations in health and well-being around consulting and strategy advice, and getting clinicians, even if I'm not an active clinician now, at the decision making part so that we can influence, um, directions of markets and clinical care.
Brilliant.
And it's
Yeah.
it's all about curiosity. It's going to be called Curiosa, which is Spanish for curiosity.
Curiosa. Yeah, I think I saw that on your LinkedIn. I knew there was a
Yeah.
story there. So that's one for another day. I'm excited to see how that develops. And again, you're an enigma yourself. You're fascinating to watch on as to what you guys go on to do at both tops and for you as an individual. So I'm excited to see that. And it's been a pleasure to be even slightly involved in and to facilitate some of those conversations. So thank you.
I'm glad you finally responded to my email I sent you years ago.
I don't think we've told everyone about that, but yeah, ghosted you all those years ago, didn't I, on email? But anyway,
I keep
lesson learned.
persevering. I keep
Lesson
sending
learned.
them.
It was an accident, honest. Thank you so much, and we'll speak again
Thank
soon.
you,
No worries,
Jack.
mate. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Here at Physio Matters, we think physio matters. Become a member today and access the biggest MSK library on the planet. Access at home, work, or in the gym to make sure your CPD conditioning is elite. Physio-matters.com. More content than will fit on a deadlift bar.